The Defector is a mere 3 episodes after The Enemy, and part of what I feel is a relaunch of the Romulans. There is, in my opinion, a thread that runs all throughout Season 3, and would have actually ended Season 3 had Redemption not been moved to Season 4 to make way for the Borg story at the end because of, issues with the contract. Otherwise, if things had stayed on course, Redemption would have been the season finale, and I think would have capped off this story, even though that's a Klingon story. I get more of that as the summer goes on. Anyway, to reiterate, the first 2 appearances of the Romulans were in The Neutral Zone and Contagion, but they're little more than they're bad guys. The Enemy was a starting point of them as a more defined threat to the Federation and a far more prominent one. While they would not have the degree of influence on TNG that the Dominion and Cardassians would have on DS9 or the Borg would on Voyager, I would say that they are the primary adversaries, even if they're not as memorable as the aforementioned Borg was in Best of Both Worlds. But that's because of the nature of their threat. While the Klingons of TOS were always considered to be the Soviets, the relationship between the Federation and the Romulans in TNG is far more close to the US-Soviet Union relationship of that time because, of course, while they are mortal enemies, those 2 nations never directly fought one another. And good thing, for it likely could have been disastrous if they had. But each one of the other undermined at every opportunity, and there was concern that between that and their mutual animosity, the 2 would eventually come to blows. Likewise, there is fear that activity could lead to a war between the Federation and the Romulans. So it's fitting that the episode begins with Data playing the part of the title character in Henry V. Under heavy makeup as Patrick Stewart as one of the players. He asked to play the part and says his contract needed to be renewed at the end of the season, of course. Well, he got it. Of course, Stewart gives a fine performance, but no matter what accent he puts on there, there's just no mistaking Patrick Stewart's voice. And since Picard is actually in the scene anyway and talking with Data, I don't see why they didn't just say that that was Picard acting with Data there. I mean, they'd already changed the scene. It was supposed to be that Data was doing the Sherlock Holmes thing again. The only reason they didn't was there was legal quibbles over whether or not they could keep doing it, so they dropped it. But actually to the betterment of the episode. It takes what would have almost certainly been a fun but irrelevant bit of fluff at the beginning and turn it into part of the tapestry of the episode, as Data inquires about Henry posing as a commoner and going amongst the men on the eve of battle. So Picard explains that it's the leader sharing in the fears of his soldiers of what the day will bring. No matter how just the cause, there should still be concern for those who have no power, only of following the decrees of their leader. But the performance is interrupted by activity in the neutral zone. A Romulan scout ship is on the way, and what's even weirder is that the pilot is requesting asylum, which sounds like the place to put any Romulan defector since the entire idea is, as Picard later puts it, a contradiction in terms. But when they spot a warbird decloaking and blasting him, Picard has them move in to protect the scout ship.
Ready. Romulan vessel, you are now in Federation territory, unless you...
Son of a... I've no idea what to do now. That's never worked before. They beam over the Romulan. You can see it's the 80s. Wow, look at those shoulder pads. Despite his injuries, he insists on speaking with Picard, claiming to be a lowly logistics officer, but nevertheless knows about a secret Romulan base within the neutral zone that will be used to annex the whole region, with enough ships to strike at so many Federation targets that there will have to be a war. Well, the natural question is whether or not to believe him, which depends on a complicated military question. So, of course, the Romulan is escorted away by Worf, the guy who handles military questions. The thing they have to decide is this a Romulan plot to test the Federation's resolve by establishing such a base? Or is this planted information to trick them into entering the neutral zone in force and provide the Romulans an excuse to start a war? And most importantly, who designed those stupid pointy things that they wear? The one bit of good news is that the scout ship is intact and will thus allow them to learn something about Romulan technology.
Establishing the truth.
Assuming they brought a vacuum cleaner to collect the pieces, of course. That was the auto-destruct. Setal, the Romulan, may be defecting, but he doesn't see himself as a traitor, which is what giving technology to the Federation would be. But he should trust the Federation. I mean, they are healing his wounds, after all.
Thank you, Doctor. How fortunate that you know something of Romulan medicine.
Yes, I had a chance to gain some experience recently.
Oh, yes. The incident at the Golondan Corps.
Crap, I assumed everyone would forget that at the end of the credits. Things get intense until Satal finally starts insulting Worf in Klingon. That's a useful skill, I might add. I used it once against someone who was insulting people in Mandalorian. You have to retaliate with a comparable response, after all. It helps to avoid escalation. That's the theory, anyway, why you should keep WMDs around just in case. If someone launches a chemical weapons attack on you, you retaliate with chemical weapons of your own instead of an invading army or dropping a nuclear bomb on them, either of which could be seen as an escalation of the threat instead of a response that's more equal. Not everyone necessarily agrees with that strategy, though, because the outcome could be
exactly the type that will get us all killed if we're not careful.
Picard and Data check out the neutral zone, but there's nothing there. But with cloaking technology, that really doesn't mean anything, does it? And then there's the message from the Admiral. He says, it seems like, from the way the Romulans are throwing a conniption, that this could be genuine, but there's just no way to know. But don't worry, Picard, all of us at Starfleet have total faith that you're doing the right thing. And if you do the wrong thing, we'll let everybody know that it's your screw-up. Ha ha, bye-bye!
Scott, Lieutenant Worf.
Yes, Captain.
Please come to my ready room.
I hope he doesn't need to give another transfusion this time. That's all I need right now. To add to this mess is the recording of the defection, which shows the Romulan warbird deliberately slowed down to avoid overtaking the scout ship. Also, after Riker brought Satal into where he'd be quartered, as in his quarters, they weren't tying horses to his hands and legs or anything, Satal pulled some small disc out of his boot while ominous music of ominous playing, so that seems pretty ominous. In the face of that, Picard enlists Data in recording the history of these events so that, if things turn to crap, there can be an objective account of what had taken place. Also, to tie back to the play, Picard wants to know the mood of the crew, though as he states he can't disguise himself and walk amongst them. Like I said, the distinctive Patrick Stewart voice would give him away every time. Meanwhile, Riker and Troy are interrogating Satal, who won't give up any information that's unrelated to the base.
Admiral Jurok!
The location of the Romulan bases along the neutral zone.
I don't know.
In your sector.
Irrelevant!
The number of troops under your admiral's command.
Irrelevant!
Hey, Ron, love that word. I am stealing that for my upcoming story. Haha, good luck. Like yours is ever going to overshadow this one. They don't believe him, but Geordi seems to think that he's telling the truth despite the evidence. Which could just be that Geordi's good nature allows him to see the best in people, like he ultimately did with the Romulan in The Enemy. What backs his side up is a probe of the planet that shows artificial radio emissions and signs of ionization which is caused by cloaked vessels or a very large hairdryer. Either way, it could indicate Romulan presence and their need to blow-dry that one approved haircut of theirs. In 10 Forward, Data stares at Satal in a most disconcerting way, trying to decide whether or not to believe him. And we gradually start to see that Satal paradoxically is betraying the Romulans because he loves Romulus so much. He thinks the war this prompts will destroy them, so he can't allow them to do that. But he can't give the Federation any help because that could be used to harm the Romulans. To comfort him, Data shows him Romulus on the holodeck, but in an ironic twist, the Romulan, whose race's reputation is one of deceit, cannot stomach the false image of his home. All it does is remind him that he can never go home again. And if he's to sacrifice that, he must make it worth something. So he confesses that he is actually Admiral Jurok, infamous for massacres of Federation outposts and notorious cheater at ping-pong. Starfleet confirms his identity and says not to trust him, but Picard sees Jurok anyway, but tells him flat out that he has brought nothing to actually prove any of this, just his word. A butcher defecting in the name of peace and insisting that he be believed while lying about who and what he is. Even Picard is merciless in his verbal bitch slaps.
I cannot betray my people.
You've already betrayed your people, Admiral. You've made your choices, sir. You're a traitor.
Damn, he set the Picard speech on kill, narrow beam. Jurok tries a different approach.
Do you have any children, Captain Picard? A family?
No.
None that could be proven in any case. Jurok says that he's doing it because of his daughter. He can't risk another war because of that, even if it means her believing that he's a traitor when she grows up. But Picard is still unmoved. He should have known bringing up children would only make things worse. So Jurok finally tells Picard what he wants to know. Fleet information, battle strategies, his understanding of Romulan technology. And with that, the Enterprise will investigate the planet to see if there is indeed a Romulan base there. Things are tense. They could get ambushed at any moment. And I don't see Wesley in the helmsman's seat. That's just a red shirt. And not even a red shirt with an up-to-date costume. I mean, that thing could be exploding at any time now. But nothing happens. There's no sign of anything. Even a cloaked base would have distortions that they could see this close. The only explanation is that because of his complaining about warmongering, they fed the Admiral false information. And we see that's correct. They created false reports for Jirac. If he did nothing, it would prove that he was still loyal and could be trusted. If he defected, he would draw in a Federation ship for an ambush like the one that's happening now, led by Tomalak, no less. As Picard remarked, it's always a chess game with the Romulans, and they seem to have control of the board now. The options are unconditional surrender of the ship, the crew, and Jirac, or be destroyed. So Picard breaks out the Henry V, but not once more into the breach. That the crew will give their lives if the cause is just. Also, as said in Act 5, Scene 1, "Beholdeth the king and my righteous pimp hand, bitches!" This was subtly hinted at. Picard called Worf up, remember? We didn't hear why. And then there was a message from the Klingons. But it was one of many communications about the situation, so it was just one more thing going on. You didn't focus on it. They used a kind of a magician's technique so that they put it out there, but then distracted you immediately afterwards with what was going on. But obviously, reading between the lines, Picard was changing the rules of the game by inviting the Klingons along. File that away for later. The Romulans slink off, but Jirac realizes that he threw everything away for nothing. So he takes that disc. It's a suicide pill. This is also suicide pill month, I guess. But anyway, he takes that pill and dies, but he leaves a letter for his daughter in the hopes that perhaps one day things will improve so that it can be delivered. I mean, because the relations have ruined. I don't know the state of the Romulan post office. Post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to Data's wig, the mushroom cap of horror. Final score for the Defector is 8 out of 10. While different from last week's Journey to Babel, it has many of the same praiseworthy qualities. It's another great mix of character piece, mystery, and tension with a terrific guest performance. It does a fine job of tilting the evidence first one way and then the other way, and yet without red herrings. How they all fit together is revealed in the end. The episode is also a very important step in the advancement of that plot thread that I mentioned, and I'll be getting to that in my next review, which will be after the break, Sins of the Father. Let's just say the Romulans might have learned something from this defeat here and taken steps.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Brother John Bates, is that not the morning which breaks yonder?